Act Out is a bare-bones, activist, independent news show, and we'd like to keep it that way, but also keep it going. So to become a patron of the show, visit patreon.com/actout. This week on Act Out, an update from the pipeline resistance forest camp in Pennsylvania, and some stranger-than-fiction backstory on fracking, corporate malfeasance, and propaganda. Next up, we don't have to see eye to eye, but in the wake of fascism's rise, we do need to agree on one basic thing. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out.
Rockets! Brigade! Bulldozers swarm outside the checkpoint gate. A noise flash broke the hush and blew me into the street. I awoke next to the body of my baby. No!
Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. You may recall from episode 119 that there's a direct action forest camp and tree sit happening in Pennsylvania right now. Known as Camp White Pine, this powerful show of resistance is nestled in a naturally breathtaking area of PA, home to the Gerhardt family and their 20-some-odd acres of not only trees, but wetlands, streams, ponds, and all the wildlife that lives there. It is, however, also home to fracking and pipelines. The Gerhardt's property is literally surrounded. The Mariner East 2 pipeline, which we'll talk more about, is Sunoco's latest pipeline construction project that has already resulted in 90 spills at 42 distinct locations across the state. Roughly 200,000 gallons of what's known as drilling mud has spilled into rural Pennsylvania aquifers, streams, and wetlands. And the damn pipeline isn't even operational yet. Meanwhile, right next to Mariner East 2 pipeline construction, the Buckeye and Enterprise pipelines run liquid petroleum products, which, as vaguely noted by Buckeye partners, includes gasoline, jet fuel, diesel fuel, heating oil, and kerosene. These pipelines also transport other refined petroleum products such as propane and butane, refinery feedstock and blending components, as well as crude oil. In other words, fuck you. Don't ask what's in it. At the same time, to the south of the Gerhardt's property is the Mariner East 1 pipeline that has also leaked. In April of this year, roughly 20 barrels of ethane and propane leaked near Morganton, Berks County. Important to note here that when natural gas liquids depressurize in the case of a leak, the liquids become gases, which can be deadly in cases of ignition. Luckily, there was no ignition in this case, but since we're on the subject, north of the Gerhardt's land is the Texas Eastern Pipeline, a set of 4 parallel pipelines carrying methane that last year ruptured in Salem, Pennsylvania as a result of corroded welding. The explosion completely destroyed a house 200 feet away. Another house 800 feet away sustained major damage, and its owner received third-degree burns. Now, without getting into the equations of this, which you can do if you like, we will post a link in the show description, but the way that these blast zones unfold is like this. Different gases disperse differently. For example, methane is lighter than air, so it disperses quickly into the atmosphere. Ethane, propane, and butane, however, tend to concentrate close to the ground and spread downwind. Even under light wind conditions, such a vapor cloud can spread across huge distances, with high variability depending on the topography, atmospheric conditions, and of course, the characteristics of the leak. That being said, in an example of a worst-case scenario, unignited gas would be allowed to migrate as an unignited vapor cloud for a couple of miles before finding an ignition source that causes an explosion that encompasses the entire covered area tracing back to the leak source. Ordinary devices like light switches or cell phones can serve as an ignition source for the entire vapor cloud. One subject matter expert recently testified before a municipal zoning hearing board that damage could be expected at a distance of 3 miles from the source of a large-scale release. Based on this information, Frack Tracker used the federal government's potential impact radius calculator to deduce that 105,419 people live in a potential blast zone from the Mariner East 2 pipeline. You know, the one that isn't even constructed yet and has already leaked 90 times. The research goes on to outline the breakdown of impacted people and environmental justice areas, as well as schools, because some 23 public schools and 17 private schools are smack dab in the best case impact zone for the Mariner East 2 pipeline. The best case. And again, if you'd like to check out the calculations and indeed figure out the blast zone for your area, visit the link below where you can also find access to Frack Tracker's maps that detail the location of fracking operations in your state and county. And speaking of which, while circling back to PA, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, or DEP, put together this map of existing and proposed pipelines in the state. And as noted by the editor of Penn Live, by the time quote-unquote development is done, there will be a pipeline cutting through every single county in Pennsylvania. Kinda seems like the Department of Environmental Protection is a bit of a misnomer. Indeed, the PA DEP has already come under fire from concerned citizens about their approval of the Mariner East 2 pipeline permits, despite the fact that there were huge regulatory deficiencies in the application. Furthermore, the DEP has turned a blind eye to such practices as the clear-cutting of trees before permit approval, a practice that Camp White Pine experienced last year when Sunoco sent in heavy machinery to fell trees without the go-ahead for pipeline construction. Indeed, appealing to the DEP has been a tiring and fruitless endeavor for many in rural Pennsylvania. But believe it or not, it might actually get worse. In late July, the Pennsylvania Senate approved a measure that would outsource environmental permit reviews to third parties in order to, quote, reduce delays to applications that add to expenses for the oil and gas industry. In other words, it's taking too long for the fossil fuel industry to get the go-ahead to destroy land and habitat, so, why don't we privatize that aspect of the process, thereby making it easier and quicker for the corporations? A classic privatization scheme that once again puts corporate profit over people and planet. And while this grotesque destruction of people, planet, and democracy is bad enough, it's worth pointing out that all of this shit is happening for the sake of a dying economic model that, even if it worked, wouldn't support the livelihoods of local people and communities. Prices for LNG are incredibly low, and domestic consumption is declining. Gas companies pin their hopes on international markets, but as Dennis Whitmer, an energy analyst and Lancaster County native, pointed out, everyone expected India and China to start importing more natural gas, but the growth rate of LNG consumption in China is not going up because their economy is in trouble. It now looks like the world market for LNG is gutted and probably will be for a long time to come. Here you have American gas companies that are overproducing and who want to sell gas to the international market, and that market is saying, we really don't need your gas. But even as capitalist markets echo the calls of locals like the Gerhardts to abandon pipelines and fracking altogether, companies are literally bulldozing ahead, trampling rights and irreplaceable nature to ultimately make a product that nobody fucking wants and that doesn't sell. They are so brazen that they even set up pro-energy transfer partner pages on Facebook that attack various pipeline resistance camps around the country, most notably Camp White Pine and Low SV camp in Louisiana. Thinly veiled as a concerned front, their pages claim that they are part of Green Libertarian Unity, which is supposedly pro-environment, pro-capitalist, and pro-freedom. One of these things is not like the other. Now, outside of posting threats and lies about protectors, these dick sticks have so clumsily created videos featuring a guy named Brent.
Hey guys, it's Brent Williamson here, reporting for Louisiana First, down in Baton Rouge.
No, wait, Josh.
Hey guys, it's Josh Baker reporting for PA Progress here in Huntington, Pennsylvania.
Josh Brent, are you a Louisiana native or a Pennsylvania native? Do you know that you have a doppelganger who's just as fucking stupid as you are? I do give you full marks for trying to look like a libertarian logger, though. Next time I recommend a pipe. Maybe wrap yourself in a don't tread on me flag. And while this shit is so absurd that it prompts a laugh, the death threats and flyovers by helicopters and drones are certainly no joke. The work that's being done at these camps is the work for environment, for freedom. Our job is to amplify this work and crush the lies and pithy attempts at slander being propagated by these corporations and their literal actors. Earlier last week, I visited Camp White Pine to get an update from Elise Gerhardt and to see the lay of the land. While there is no footage of the camp due to safety reasons, this upcoming video will show you exactly where the nearest pipelines are to the Gerhardt's property. Elise will then fill you in on the latest news. Take a look. A warning sign for the Buckeye Pipeline. The Buckeye and Enterprise run along the Gerhardt's property, and as Elise Gerhardt told me, these are old pipelines that were brought back into commission with the fracking boom after the Gerhardts bought their property in the early 1980s. You can see the shaved tree line that exposes the path of these existing pipelines. The proposed Mariner East 2 pipeline would go right alongside of them, and you can see the proposed path to the right of the existing pipeline path on the hillside. And you can see the pipeline pieces, and the Gerhardt's property are the trees that you can glimpse there on the right-hand side, where clear cutting has already begun and where tree sits are currently taking place to protect and resist. I'm not going to show you that for the security and safety of the camp, but this is the land that Sunoco, now Energy Transfer Partners, wants to destroy.
There was an appeal of the permits that were issued by the Department of Environmental Protection that was launched by 3 environmental nonprofits, Clean Air Council, Mountain Watershed Association, and Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And as part of that appeal, they asked for a halt on the horizontal directional drilling projects for the pipeline. There's approximately 200 HDD sites along the pipeline route just in Pennsylvania. And what HDD is when they directionally bore underneath either a water body or a wetland or a very populated area where trenching is just impossible. And while Sunoco has been doing their construction since February, these organizations and a lot of individuals have been monitoring what they're doing, and homeowners and property owners living along the route have been experiencing what's happening. And what they saw was that there were many, many instances of spills of horizontal directional drilling fluid, either spilled on the surface or during the process of drilling, people's aquifers were actually punctured, and the drilling fluid leaks into those aquifers and then winds up in people's drinking water. So people were, getting brown water out of their tap, and a lot of people weren't even notified by the DEP that this was happening, even though the DEP was notified by the company in most circumstances. And so there were over 90 instances of contamination, either from runoff or this HDD fluid winding up in people's water. And so those organizations who are appealing the permits, they asked a judge at the Environmental Hearing Board to halt the drilling, and he agreed to that. And so we had a 2-week drilling halt in late July and early August. And then the parties came to an agreement where Sunoco now has to, at each and every drill site, go back and do geologic studies and test people's water, do baseline testing of water wells. Now the company claims that they're able to restart drilling, but they're really not, at least not right away. They have to go back and do these studies, resubmit to the DEP. People with wells in a certain distance of the drilling are going to be able to make comments, and then the DEP has to reapprove the new plans. So it's going to be a process that they're going to have to go through before they actually have the right to, complete construction of the pipeline.
Do you trust them to do actual legitimate studies? And secondly, is the DEP somebody that you can trust in terms of actually making a legitimate decision on that?
I think it's really important, if people have the ability to do it, that they have their own independent testing done, because Sunoco Energy Transfer Partners cannot be trusted. I mean, I don't trust them on anything, and I don't trust that even with these new quote-unquote protections in place, that there aren't going to be more incidents, because they have just been so careless this whole time. These are studies that they could have done before they started doing any construction, and they just simply chose not to, and no agency, including the DEP, forced them to. So the DEP has just been complicit. I don't expect them not to approve the new plans, and so we're just gonna keep going with our direct action, because this isn't a long-term solution. We're never going to get a long-term solution from the state, on this project. So we're going to continue to do what we're doing out here and, hold them accountable ourselves. And right now, Sunoco is making a lot of efforts to con people into signing agreements, or they have already conned people into signing agreements, which take away people's ability to sue them down the road for injury or property damage or even for inconvenience. And a lot of the people whose water wells were contaminated have been faced with that choice of either continuing to not have a water source or signing a document with Sunoco saying that they will never sue Sunoco and then getting hooked up to a public water supply on Sunoco's dime. So they're really, kind of putting people between a rock and a hard place once they've already, done this damage.
And earlier you mentioned something about 100,000 people being in the pathway of being affected by this pipeline, and yet, as far as I know, your family and your group here is the only ones doing this kind of action to fight the pipeline. Have you been in conversation with other people along the pipeline's path that would be interested in doing something similar, or what has the response been?
I think there are some people who are getting motivated to take action. I know that there's been some trainings happening in other parts of the state, and I do hope to see other folks stepping up to the plate. And I mean, I guess we kind of had done the research beforehand, and we had known about projects of this nature beforehand, and so we kind of knew what was coming, and we tried to tell people. But then some people, it took the actual damage from construction happening in their neighborhood for them to get motivated to take action. But it's not too late, and so I hope people continue to come out and do that.
Okay, and could quick reminder tell people how they could support the camp?
You can find us on Facebook at Camp White Pine. We're the only direct action forest defense Camp White Pine that's on there. And you can also support us through fundraiser.com/Camp White Pine, and that goes directly to our legal funds.
The links that Elise mentioned are available at the end of the show and in the show description on YouTube, so please do take a look. Now, moving on, there has been a lot of banter back and forth since the events in Charlottesville unfolded. And for personal and professional reasons, I have absolutely no interest or intention in glorifying terror porn or appealing to its addicts. That being said, there's something that we gotta cover. The left's almost enviable ability to shit on its own movements and comrades, and I could put it to you in my own words, but somebody else already put it a whole lot better. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal that you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who patternistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. It is both maddening and instructive that King's words ring so true today. In the days following the Charlottesville terrorist attack, well-meaning liberals were falling over themselves to both condemn the violence of the fascists and wag a patronizing finger at the counter-protesters who fought back. The finger-wagging continued when last week Takia Thompson tied a rope to a Confederate statue, after which a group of people chanting, "No Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA," tore it down. The internet immediately flooded with messages from those well-meaning liberals, once again trying to straddle an impossible chasm of injustice, saying that they totally think that these statues should come down, but there are quote-unquote better ways. And yes, there have been several communities and cities that have voted to remove Confederate statues. Indeed, the fascist gathering in Charlottesville used a statue removal as a catalyst for their race riot. But riddle me this, merry liberals. If a city has made no efforts to take down white supremacist statues, why should the people accept that? Why should they be forced to wait on a system steeped in white supremacy? What is it about seeing a statue destroyed by a powerful black woman that fills you with fear and disgust? One flimsy argument is that it's about taking them down in order to then preserve them in a museum so as to acknowledge this part of our past. Bullshit. As someone who grew up in the South, trust me, we don't need a statue to be reminded of our history. It is soaked into the humid air we breathe. It hangs over every city like weeping willows. The street names, the town names, the history books, whitewashed, and reenactments. The Civil War doesn't live in a statue. It lives in the culture. The pride for the antebellum oppression rings louder than crickets on a hot summer night. I'm not even black, and I feel it. Be it the statues or the coward hide behind the First Amendment, this is about wanting to wear a mask adorned with Black Lives Matter stickers while clinging to an order that is based on white supremacy. It's as simple as that. As Kelly Hayes wrote in a Truth Out article last week, the respectable liberals' condemnations of counter-protesters in Charlottesville are also rooted in the need to maintain white order. It has long been their policy to acknowledge inequity, but to argue that it must be allowed to continue. For now. To such people, a lynch mob is speech until someone is killed. For the sake of order and everyone's freedoms, we are supposed to watch as our would-be killers gather, pick up torches, and rally for our deaths. Liberals have repeatedly echoed the Nazis and the KKK should be starved of attention, but the truth is the liberal plan of ignoring fascists until they go away helped deliver us to this moment. Ignoring fascists is about as effective as ignoring bedbugs, if bedbugs also had semi-automatic weapons and a sense of entitlement bloated by 500 years of oppressing people that don't look like them. Which is the problem. It's easy for a white person to stand there and think, well, it's not me that they want to kill. Let them speak. And then turn away and ignore them. Indeed, I have no idea what it's like to walk along the street and know that someone thinks that I should die simply because of the color of my skin. And this white privilege is so often used as an excuse to perpetuate our access to that privilege, as opposed to using it as a tool to combat the privilege, to combat racism and white supremacy. It's used to tell the oppressed, as MLK wrote, to wait for a more convenient season. To not fight back, not stand up, not sit down, not turn their backs, but to wait. Wait for those in power to give you your rights. Don't take. That's rude. And I'm not going to rehash the argument on violence, because I've already done that in both the episode on J20 and G20. The bottom line of that argument is the same one that applies to the finger-wagging liberal concerned by the property destruction or infringement upon free speech. Real solidarity doesn't mean that you have to like every tactic or even partake in any one tactic, but it does mean that before you open your mouth or set your fingers on the keyboard, pause. Consider whether or not your response benefits the goals of those that you outwardly support, or if it benefits a programmed concept of capitalist white supremacy. Ask yourself if your response is based in a privileged paradigm that abstractly hails concepts like free speech without considering the implications of hiding behind those concepts in the face of actual fascism. As Catherine Cross wrote in The Establishment, the Klansmen, Nazis, and neo-Confederates were marching en masse in broad daylight without hoods or masks. That boldness has its origins in the permission granted by powerful institutions and prominent commentators, who said the marketplace of ideas would crush Nazism, in Twitter's ongoing failure to stamp out the Nazi presence on the platform, and the excuses made by liberal left commentators eager to score easy points off of student activists rather than do the hard work needed to fight an actual threat to freedom. It is way easier to post a picture of the First Amendment on your page than to look at our current situation and see that free speech isn't about protecting someone's right to oppress. Indeed, if we let history be our guide here, we can take a page from Austrian Jewish British philosopher Karl Popper's book on the paradox of tolerance. The paradox ultimately states that unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed, and tolerance with them. We should therefore claim, in the name of tolerance, the right not to tolerate the intolerant. We should claim that any movement preaching intolerance places itself outside the law, and we should consider incitement to intolerance and persecution as criminal, in the same way as we should consider incitement to murder, or to kidnapping, or to the revival of the slave trade as criminal. Just like those who preach total freedom miss the point that, in fact, complete freedom for some is slavery for the rest. If you argue that we must tolerate everything, even the intolerance of a violent racist mob, then we ironically lose not only tolerance, but we also stand to lose the kind of society that tolerates any dissenting viewpoints. As Catherine Cross so succinctly put it, securing unlimited rights for Nazis does not guarantee my rights, it forfeits them. I'm so sorry, my fellow whites, that you can't have it both ways. You can't be a champion for equality while also championing the rights of fascists to dismantle what little equality has been gained. The well-meaning liberal argument about property destruction, free speech, and whether or not it's okay to punch someone who actively supports exterminating millions of people is not only counterproductive to the very idea of progress, it is vehemently damaging to those who are most oppressed, i.e., people of color, blacks, indigenous, immigrants, etc. As a white leftist, I want your help. I need your help. I want us to have real conversations about tactics, about analyzing strategy and specific goals. I want to see us work together and acknowledge a difference in perspective that can be constructive rather than destructive. But before we get to the table, we need to make sure we remove ourselves and our ideas from a white supremacist pedestal. In solidarity. And that will do it for this week's Dose of Dissent. Thank you so much for watching. Please spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. Check out the last slide and the YouTube description to see the sites that I mentioned in this week's show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. And also, for all of you podcast listeners out there, the Act Out podcast comes out every Friday and is available on iTunes and Libsyn at actout.libsyn.com. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, donate at Occupy.com/donate. If you'd like to donate directly to Act Out, visit patreon.com/actout.
I can hear the boots are stomping. Come on, boys, let's get some rocks to throw. I can't stand to hear my father cry anymore. Time we left one of you motherfuckers dead in the road. We've been begging up inch by inch, we got nowhere else to go. It's been too many years since you pushed and said my shove. I'm not a violent